2021 minus 1992.
Oh, like 29 years?
Is that what you got?
Like around 30 years.
Okay, wait a second.
Wait, I can
Okay,
do this. 32, 10.
minus 119.
Yeah, about around 30 years. I didn't do the math, like, but yeah, like,
Yeah, 29 years.
yeah,
Uh,
29 years.
equals. I was 36 years old.
36. Oh wow. Oh wow. That's good because I know
I'm
that some
65 right now.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Old senior.
Yeah, because I know that mommy was probably what, like 10 or
Shit, I don't
maybe
know. Let me do the math again. When was Michelle born? So we said 1992
yes.
minus 1978 equals. She was 14.
Okay, 14, 1978.
That means Tim was around 14 too.
Huh. Cool, cool, cool. So, just in that time, what do you remember? And what were your emotions towards everything going on?
Well, this is what I remember. Everything I remember is what I saw. I didn't see anything in person, is what I saw on the news.
Okay.
And I remember the guy who videotaped, he witnessed it. He went outside. Apparently there was a car chase. They were chasing after Rodney King in his little raggedy car. They claimed it was going so fast, but I doubt it very seriously because the car was so raggedy. But they
Okay.
caught and then they beat the crap out of him, and they didn't know the guy was taping it. So the guy was taping it, and thank God that he was. I think he heard the ruckus, and he went out on his balcony. It was like where his house was, his apartment or whatever, and he
Uh-huh.
started taping it. This is what I heard from the news, and then he gave it to the news media, and then they put it out there, and everybody saw it. Everybody saw what happened.
Right.
Did they show you guys a tape of it?
Yeah, yeah, we did. They did. I have some videos that we're gonna look at.
Yeah, they
Um,
beat the crap out of that guy. Unnecessarily beat the crap out of him. Maybe he should have been arrested, but not. They were trying to kill him.
yeah, yeah. And did acts like that, like where African Americans got beat up or like just severely beat up, did that happen a lot?
Well, because I didn't hang out in the streets, but I'm homey. I stayed at home. But yeah, they did. And when we were living in Pacoima, when they came over there. Oh heck yeah, they were beaten and yeah, that stuff happened a lot. Police thinking they can do anything to you because it's just their word against ours. So they were beating the shit out of some of the teenagers back then when we were going to school.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And as a kid, so it was most likely way worse as a kid growing up. Were you ever in that crowd where you dealt? I believe probably not. Um,
Because I was like I said, we were for starters, we weren't allowed to run the streets and get into that kind of trouble because our father would have beat the shit out of us if we. So we weren't doing nothing like that as kids. We would have got our
okay.
ass beat. We weren't in no crowd running, doing nothing. But when we were in junior high, in McClay Junior High School, when I was that's you guys middle school, we had a lot of stuff was going on, especially after like I'll just say for one example, when Dr. Martin Luther King got killed, and when President Kennedy got killed, and all that stuff happened. Uh, the college kids would be out there protesting in the area, right? But I
Okay.
was like, we were teenagers, and they were telling us, "Don't go to school today, go home." And we're looking at them, we're saying, "Shit, our father would kick our asses. We go home. We're going to school. We did everything by the book. We weren't getting our butts kicked."
Yeah.
So that type of stuff was going on back then, but not for us because we were taking our butts to school and getting in our class
Yeah.
because
So
we had to.
right. So you at the time when all that was going on, you were mainly protected by your father, and you were just doing what he wanted and kept you guys out of trouble. We're gonna watch a little segment, and I'm just gonna like go ahead and brush on your memory. We're gonna look at the videos and just we're just gonna go on a little a flashback, I guess you would say, on the what happened. I'm gonna go ahead and do share screen so you can see.
Okay.
Um, Tell me if you can see my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is going to be, it's about 22 minutes, but we're only going to watch a couple.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, the news.
yeah, and then I'll just probably ask you a couple questions, ask you about your thoughts, maybe some
Okay.
feelings that had come up that you might
Oh,
have
is this
forgotten
the
about.
is
Yeah.
this the right stuff? Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
And an attempt to answer the question of why the jury came up with a not guilty verdict.
One of the King trial jurors, who wants to remain anonymous, admitted the King beating video made an instant impression on that jury. But that same Simi Valley juror said a closer inspection of the video left her with a very different and a very shocking impression.
But when you see it in its entirety, we saw it regular speed and slow motion and frame by frame, repeatedly over and over and over again, looking at specific actions of each specific officer and indeed of Rodney King to see what stimulated their actions to go as they did go. And I am thoroughly convinced, as were the others, I believe, that Mr. King was in full control of the whole situation at all times.
This juror also said she was convinced that Rodney King was under the influence of both alcohol and PCP.
What most Americans saw when they watched Rodney King struck 56 times by white policemen, a jury saw differently.
Not guilty of the crime of assault by force, likely to produce great bodily injury.
Shock quickly turned into anger.
The same way I'm angry, you should be angry. You should be angry.
And anger turned into violence.
The trouble began Wednesday afternoon at this intersection in South Central Los Angeles. Cars attacked, the occupants beaten and robbed. At first, no police responded, and when they finally did, they left almost immediately. It would be hours before they were mobilized, and even then, much of the looting would continue with impunity. But today, Police Chief Daryl Gates defended what he called a balanced response.
We had what we thought was an appropriate response. We were trying not to be provocative. We didn't want to bring out a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The concern was that a massive show of police force would only aggravate the disturbance. That strategy.
Wait, what happened?
I was talking about Chief Daryl Gates was so prejudiced, it was just a shame.
Really? That was him?
But yeah, that was him speaking, police chief. Yeah.
In what way? Or like was that, did he show up often when it came to this stuff?
No. But he was in charge of the LAPD. Those guys, yeah, they were a mess. When
Yeah.
Yeah. They were prejudiced as hell.
I believe it. I definitely do believe it.
By the time police did respond, they were overwhelmed. Critics say the police should have mobilized before the Rodney King verdict and deployed at the first sign of trouble.
It led many to ask what happened to the LAPD.
Quite frankly, we were overwhelmed. And our response, I wish, I'm a perfectionist, I wish it had been much faster, but it was not.
Today, looters scavenged stores and businesses at will. This laundromat owner found her building cleaned out.
Crowd starts dragging whites and Mexican Americans from their vehicles and beating them. Then, the scene that came to symbolize the brutality of the riot. Reginald Denny is pulled from his truck and nearly killed. Denny appears to beg for assistance. Other blacks later help him escape. Looters begin stripping stores.
Okay, I did have a question about that, about what happened to that man.
Yeah.
For one, do you think that if the police would have intervened, just because you were there, and I know that there was way more to cover than just what we've seen. Do you think that if the police did intervene sooner, like they were saying, do you think that they would have been able to control the situation, or do you think that they would been? Do you think that they even justified to try to control the rebellion?
You know what? They should have tried. That was their job.
Right.
But I don't know what happened and why they weren't out there. But they should have been out there trying to protect those businesses or whatever.
Right.
They should have been out there with their riot gear on, stopping that mob of crazy people. But
Right.
they, you know,
Right.
I
Right.
don't know why they didn't. I don't know why they didn't. So I couldn't
Hmm.
say that.
I think that they knew like the anger that was behind the mob. I think
And
that
maybe
they
they thought they would have been overpowered. Maybe that's
right.
because I'm not the police chief, so I don't know what was in his head at the time.
Uh-huh.
Right? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I think
I
he
don't have any people that they had. I don't know any of the details. So
yeah, I think that he was just trying to protect his officers. I think that if the police would have gotten involved earlier, when everything was really blowing up, I think that the African Americans we would have fought them. We would have fought the other policemen trying to stop. I think there was just too much
yeah,
going on.
they would have gotten shot too because the cops have guns,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then before we continue, do you think that, and I think you already answered it, do you think that throwing their anger at random white people and random Latinos and random Koreans, do you think that that was okay for them to do? Do you think that that was
Of course not.
um
No, I think that no, they were not justified. They shouldn't have done that. I don't believe in that type of stuff. That's
yeah,
ridiculous to be out there
yeah,
fighting and acting a fool because you're mad. That's not going to solve anything. It's just going to get people killed, right?
yeah. I do think that
We're just acting like animals. They should have done that. I don't agree with any of that kind of stuff. That's my
so
opinion.
and then for the peaceful protests though, so this is more violence, more just
Yeah,
um craziness. For
yeah.
peaceful protests, you agree more with the peaceful protests compared to what they did.
Yes, I do believe. Yeah,
Hmm.
it, yeah. I don't believe in violence to go out there fighting and breaking the law. Doing anything to break the law, then your ass is going to jail. So seriously, it should be like that. You should be out there breaking the law, right?
Right,
Yeah. You
right,
don't have a right to beat up on innocent people.
right,
Okay,
right.
you know.
Yeah,
No, I
I think that I not I wasn't there,
don't.
but I just as like secondhand, I learned about like after I learned about everything that like the white race has done, and I think I was a little bit more on the other side of it. I'm not gonna say that it was justified. I'm not gonna say that I condone violence, um, but I felt like that was coming. I felt like
Uh,
that anger was built. I feel like all the way from slavery to Jim Crow to just segregation in and of itself. I just felt like that the riots or the rebellion, I felt like it was coming, and I felt like Rodney King and the beating. I just don't think that was justified. I don't feel like the how everyone reacted. I don't think that was justified, but I do feel like some type of just I don't
well,
know.
they what I was going to say was they didn't start rioting and fighting until after the four officers that were that they that were going to court being
Yeah.
accused of crime. They
Right.
determined that it wasn't a crime, and that's when everybody went crazy because
Oh,
everybody saw that they did commit a crime. They beat the crap out of that guy. They were trying to kill him.
right.
So they went to court, and the four officers they let them go. They
Free.
told them there's no crime, and they let them free. And then that's why when everybody went crazy and started rioting, went to the streets and started tearing everything up. But you can't. You're taking your anger out on innocent people and innocent businesses and all that kind of stuff. That's ridiculous. That's not the way to do it. You
Right.
can protest. You can register to vote and try to vote these people out, and this stuff. You have to do it the legal way. You can't do it
Right.
the illegal way. Everything has to be done legal. Otherwise, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Oh well, yeah, that was something ridiculous. But back there in with the Rodney King stuff, the people, the community was angry when those cops got when they let them loose, and they just they just act a fool.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous, pulling people out of their cars and beating them. What the hell? I remember when I was in high school, we had riots when I went to San Fernando High School. It was always the Mexicans against the blacks, and
Really?
every so often we had riots within our schools. all the Mexicans would get together. No, the Mexicans against the blacks, and then the poor Asian people would get beat up too, just because. Even in junior high school, we had riots where the racists were fighting within our schools. I mean, me and my sister would always, in high school, I remember we were having a riot, and we were both in the same high school. We always find each other because we got to be together now because everybody's gathering together. So she and I gather ourselves together and with our friends. We got to go with the black people.
Yeah, what the?
One time we had a riot. It was a big group of Mexicans over there, and we was just us. We looked, and there was this big old tall ass fence. Me and my sister Beanie, we had to run. Davis, no mother. We had to run that fence. We had to scale the fence to get to the other side where our people.
Oh my God.
We were in high school. So we were having riots within our schools like that stuff.
What?
And they would always go to the tennis courts and where the Asian people were, and they always got beat up. And when I was in junior high school, it was mostly because we went to McClellan Junior High School, which was mostly a black school, and the white, they were busing some white kids into the school, and they would always get beat up. We would have riots. So when we were in school, they were having riots. But
really?
We never participated in them. We would have got killed doing that type of stuff. But we had to save ourselves, especially in high school because we were in San Fernando, and that city was where most of the Mexicans lived, in San Fernando. And we lived in Pacoima, but we had to go to San Fernando High School. I'll never forget that. And we had at least two riots like that, and they were like blood and everything else was going on. It was the Mexicans against the blacks all the time.
What? That's crazy.
Deployment of more than 13,000 National Guardsmen.
The events in 1965 were eerily similar to 1992. You had a man who was pulled over by CHP for suspected drunk driving. He's apprehended, then brutally beaten by police officers. Also, like in 92, you have violence that emerges from anger that's simmering just under the surface of civil society. Legal apartheid had only been ended 2 years prior in 1963, and the city was still essentially de facto segregated. African Americans were still relegated to a small part of the city and were prevented by both bigotry and the law from being included in the post-war economic boom that was going on across the country. As for the LAPD, well,
as long as he is black and a member of the Negro community, the white public thinks that the white policeman is justified in going in there and trampling on that man's civil rights and on that man's human rights.
That same year, Korean immigrants flooded en masse to Los Angeles. In 1965, immigration restrictions had been lifted, and Korean immigrants came to Los Angeles fleeing a country that had been torn apart by a disastrous civil war 10 years prior. But they entered a United States that was suspicious and even hostile towards Asians. And they came into a city, Los Angeles, that was still divided by race and ethnicity. And the kind of businesses they bought were marginal in nature, liquor stores and corner markets. But by the 80s, Korean immigrants were actually doing very well, and their kids were off to college, many of them right here to UCLA. But in the same token, African Americans in the 80s were not doing quite so well. In the 70s, you had the departure of the automotive industry. That divestment coincided with the entrance of crack into Los Angeles. And in that context, poverty and violence and gang warfare rose to prominence, and police brutality was the only thing that really continued unabated. So you had this anger boiling up in the black community of South Los Angeles. And really the only people in their immediate view were Korean American merchants. These merchants were perceived to be sort of rude, cheap, and racist, not really caring about their black customers, right? It's important to understand that these misconceptions about Korean merchants arose from sort of cultural misunderstandings. For example, in Korean culture, it's actually rude to use somebody's first name. You don't even call your wife or your husband by their first name. If I come into a Korean merchant store and they don't call me by my name, even though I come in there every day and spend money, I'm going to perceive them as not caring about me as a human being. And another small cultural misunderstanding that could happen is, for example, if I go to a Korean merchant and ask for change, he'll just throw it down on the table. But that's because in Korean culture, it's actually rude to touch skin to skin. But if I'm not privy to that culture, I don't understand that throwing change down on the table in front of me is not rude, it's just actually avoiding an awkward exchange. There was also the perception that these Korean merchants were somehow cheap.
Drink, 85 cents. You pay or go. It's a phi. I don't understand a phi. There's a V in the word. It's five. You don't got these in China? Not Chinese. I'm Korean.
But you have to remember that these are local, marginal businesses. They can't buy in bulk like Ralph's, so that their prices have to be marked up a little bit to make any sort of profit. Obviously, there was racist sentiment dispersed amongst both communities, but until the media entered the picture, there was no real sense of animosity. So as we've established, South Central at this time was starting to become a really violent place to run a business. So Korean store owners started to arm themselves. Now, when you have a upsurge in gun ownership and a prevalence of fear, tragedies happen. And tragedy did strike when 15-year-old black girl Latasha Harlins was shot by Korean store owner Soon Ja-do in 1991. The way it was covered by the mainstream media was that a rude Korean store owner shot a young, defenseless black girl over a bottle of orange juice. This inflammatory media coverage really strained the relationship between the black and Korean communities in Los Angeles more than anything. And afterwards, there was a number of boycotts, robberies, and even firebombings of Korean stores. There was really no time for this fracture between the two communities to heal because not much later, in 1992, Rodney King was beaten by 4 white officers.
Oh, so I think I got it mixed up. The Harlan's case happened before the riots or the rebellion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
Title action, find the defendant, Lawrence M. Powell, not guilty of the crime.
But yeah, so that's kind of like what I wanted to address with that. Just because it was something that I learned. I didn't know that the Koreans were targeted in that way, or like the Asian Americans with their stores. I didn't know that, and so that was something that I learned. And I was wondering, did you know that? Did you know that they were targeted?
No, I didn't.
Was there, when growing up, was there any tension when it came to the liquor stores? Like the people, the guy was saying that there was some tensions when it came to like the liquor stores and the Koreans being mean in some way.
Because they were in LA and I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and
Right. Okay.
the stores that we went to, we weren't having those kind of problems.
Okay.
Out in LA is a different story. We never really went out to LA unless we were visiting our cousins that were out there.
Right.
So we were in the San Fernando Valley, so I didn't grow up around all of that, what they're doing out there.
I see.
Yeah, when we went to the store, we never had that. Well, wasn't going to the store that often either, but we weren't really seeing that type of problem, noticing that type of stuff.
I see.
And in the San Fernando Valley, we didn't have a lot of Asian people owning most of the stuff out there. I don't know who was owning it, but we had, it wasn't like the San Fernando Valley and the LA were different from each other.
I see. So was there less discrimination and racial things going on other than your school and stuff like that? It was less as dramatic in San Fernando than in LA?
It must have been, because we didn't have that kind of excitement when they had all the riots and stuff. All that stuff that stuff was out in LA. It wasn't really not in the San Fernando Valley. We weren't, except for what we had in our schools and stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that we were experiencing then. But we never had problems with the stores. Well, we had, and like in Pacoima, we had different stores out there, but some black people owned some of the businesses too. And the funny thing is, when we were growing up, back in those days, blacks can only buy property in certain areas. They wouldn't let us buy. They were so prejudiced. They had rules where we couldn't buy in certain areas. That's why when you see black neighborhoods and They would only let us buy, our parents buy homes in certain areas, and that was it. They couldn't
Wow.
buy wherever they wanted. It was so prejudiced.
Yeah. Yeah. When do you think that started lifting, where you could enter any store without fearing anything like that?
Oh, well, you talking about the stuff that out in LA?
Yeah, no, well, like just like so, like you said that your parents were able to go into any
Oh,
stores, and when did that start to lift?
you know, when I was a kid, I never noticed any of that stuff. If any of that prejudice stuff was going on, we never noticed it.
Oh,
We weren't allowed to go running this all over the place like that, but we just stayed within our neighborhood and the stuff that was going on in our neighborhood, you know, our bowling alleys and our shopping centers. When we were kids, we got to go and do all that stuff, and we weren't having any problems out in the San Fernando Valley.
huh.
Not like those guys, not like the way out in LA, not like what was happening to them out in LA. We weren't
Right.
having, yeah, we weren't
Yeah.
having those, not that severe. And if it was going on, we really didn't notice it.
Hmm.
Most of that, some of that prejudice stuff, I didn't really notice all that stuff until I got older, and then, you know, start picking up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
maybe we were living in a bubble.
Maybe San Fernando was that safe bubble that you guys
There
didn't really.
was a bunch of stuff going on, but as a child and growing up and us playing outside, and we just didn't know about it. Our parents didn't tell us about it, so I honestly didn't know about most of that stuff. So like went to the high school, then we riot, the Mexicans, we were having riots within the school, that stuff. But the other stuff, that my parent, when I hear about some of this stuff and I look at it and I said, damn, I was such and such age when this was going on. And a lot of this stuff was happening a lot back in the South, in the southern states. But I guess California was more modern than what some of those other states were, because
Right. Yeah.
we were like in Arkansas, my parents were from Arkansas and all that stuff. They were really prejudiced and some tough stuff out there, but we didn't live out there. So we didn't like, I didn't never live out there. So I didn't really experience any of that stuff
Yeah.
the way they did. And they moved out here to California, and they were pregnant with me. They moved out here, you know. So I
I
was born in
see.
California. It was
I
not
see.
as bad as not as bad as it was out in the southern states. They were really having
South.
it bad out there. So, but
Right.
so
Right.
I didn't notice most of that stuff, and nobody told me. I was just didn't notice it. So I don't know.
Wow, that's crazy.
But in over in LA across the freeway, they were having more trouble than what we were having in the valley. In the valley, we would just go to schools and mind our own business, and we didn't go to stores and get insulted. But you did go to the stores, but we wasn't going to the stores that often. But as we got older and we start shopping, of course you have the you go to a store and they're following around the store thinking that you're stealing. We had that type of stuff going on, but who gives it? Who cares? I'm not stealing, so I don't care. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
that type of stuff going on. They thought all black people were bad and what have you. Yeah, they still think that till today. But
Yeah.
I say,
Okay, so I'm
anyway,
going to I'll ask you 3 questions from the list. And this is just a random one.
all right.
So I'm asking number 16, and it is: do you think racism will end in your lifetime or mine?
It's not going to end in my lifetime. No. As far as yours is concerned, I don't think it's going to end in yours either.
Really?
You're going to be fighting this fight for a long time now. Well, look how long this has been going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I don't want to be.
It's been going on since slavery. Slavery's over, and the white people just don't understand that it's over. I don't get it either. No, it's never going to be over. Okay. I won't say it in my lifetime. I thought about that too. No, I won't witness that in my lifetime. And you probably won't witness it in yours either.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And then this second one is it's if you could go back, would you participate more in the fight for Black equal lives and freedom?
No. I mean, what more can I do? What do you mean? Exactly what does that mean? Would I participate?
Um, because there was organizations like the NACC, or I forgot what it was. There was organizations that Rosa Parks organized. Um,
Yeah, the NAACP.
yeah. Sorry, I just
If I
um,
could go back to where? Where am I go back to?
just go back in time. I mean, any time where you just remember it being prejudiced, and just probably even most likely 1992, maybe not. When you actually were knowledgeable of what was going on. So around your 20s and before, you had kids and things like that. Would you go back, and would you be a little bit more present? And if you didn't have that already distilled mindset of, I have to follow the rules and I don't want to be rebellious, and just like the way that following the path of doing the right thing, that's just the way Granny is. Would you be a little bit more rebellious, or would you feel like, just because where we are in life now, like you were saying, things haven't really changed, um would you be more involved in it?
Well, you mean if I would be out there protesting and all that stuff?
Yeah, would you be more involved?
Probably not.
Probably not. Well,
Well, the only thing I can do now is try to vote for the proper people and try to. That's the only thing I can do. I can't go out there and fight the battle.
I see.
You know,
I see.
I probably wouldn't do that.
And this is just this is not a question, but more, this is just like something to think about. I guess, like my teacher says, food for thought. And this is something that I asked myself while doing this project. Is the movement really moving? And we were talking about it, about a couple questions before. But things that are happening, that happened in 1992, 1965, are still happening in 2020 and 2021. And the question really is, I guess, a big broader question of it all for my project is the movement ever moving, and will it ever move to a direction of where it's not? I hope that when I'm like 80, or I'm like, well, when I'm older, like, I hope that there is a difference, and I hope that the movement does really move, and we start making momentum, because the years of suppression and the years of systematic racism and the years of it all, just being held back by the white people, have put us back. It really has put us back, back, back. Huh?
I think it's moving slowly, but it is moving, and we can see the big difference here in 2020, when all of you young people were starting to get involved. Everybody, people from all different races were getting involved. It wasn't like that before. It's moving. They're learning, and it's gonna get better. It's just slow as hell.
Yeah.
Especially when we get somebody like our last leader, Trump, in charge, when he's prejudiced as hell, trying to put us back in slavery. When you get that type of crap, that's why I said you guys got to get involved with our politics. You got
Yeah.
to know the judges that you're voting on, and people got to get involved that way, and don't
Right.
ever let something like that happen again. Yikes.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great analogy.
Yeah,
Great
that's a step
analogy.
backwards. You got to work. Everybody's got to work. In 2020, I noticed, and a lot of people noticed, that all of the different races were coming together, and they all saw what went down, and they were all agreeing. We've never saw that before.
Really?
No, this is different. This maybe because everybody was off work because of the virus.
Pandemic. Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking too. But everybody paid attention, and we were hearing from everybody, and that's kind of it's moving slowly, but it's moving.